It's a big tower you build with little stones, and you have to pick out the stones and keep the tower stable. So if you do it in the wrong way and move too much pieces or the wrong pieces on one side, it will collapse completely. So your plan will be destroyed. So when you are negotiating with those unions, you have to keep in mind, my tower has to be steady. There has to be a steady ground to stay on. Otherwise it will collapse and your plan will be useless.
Hello, I'm Isabelita Castillo, an Executive Career Transition Advisor. Welcome to the 7th episode of Coffee with Top Elite Executives. I'll be speaking to the creme de la creme, senior leaders and managers who have crossed my path along my career journey and truly impressed me based on their exceptional leadership skills and charisma. My goal and mission is to share with my audience insights and expertise that can be followed as a success formula. Today's guest is from the logistics sector and is an expert in strategy planning and implementation, deriving from a solid track record of steering change management projects. He's a strong advocate of empowering teams to reach high-level performance and achieve corporate goals. Stefan is passionate about innovation, strategy, data analytics, restructures, and building successful teams. He speaks fluent English and is a native Dutch speaker. Now I invite you to join me in welcome Stefan Heijinis. Stefan, first of all, thank you so much for being here today and wanting to share your expertise and advice with my audience. So episode number 7, I guess it's the lucky 7. I wonder what it means. Now, firing and hiring requires a lot of emotional intelligence skills. And I'm really curious to know how you do that. So now let's tell our audience a little bit about your background and what's the success formula behind restructuring and empowering teams.
Well, thank you, Isabelita. It's an honor to be here today.
It's my pleasure.
As you said, I'm Dutch, but I already want to apologize for my fellow Dutchies because they are confusing some things most of the time because they say, hey, we are very direct, but they confuse it with being rude. So I'm sorry for that. Well, one of my biggest passions is different cultures, visiting them by traveling, and also sports. Especially the different cultures help me with the transformational changes in worldwide. So it's easier for me to understand different cultures, finding out the stakeholders, and when I combine this with data, we always get a good fit for the organization.
Wow, how interesting that. Stefan, I remember that during our conversation, you were telling me a little bit that, it's been lots of unprecedented, scenarios worldwide where as a consequence, you were responsible for a very big mission, which is to downsize an operation of a Forbes 500 aviation company of 1,100 employees. And this is for me like, wow, how do you do that, right? So it must require a lot of emotional intelligence and preparation to do that. So could you tell a little bit more about, how do you manage, how do you maintain that balance between reaching the corporate goals and making sure you downsize strategically? At the same time, how do you sleep at night, Stefan, when you have to actually cut people off like this?
Well, Isabelita, when I started with this, it was my first big assignment and the first time I got a direct order from the board to downsize the company. We started with analyzing all processes so we could see on which departments we could downsize the most. And of course, at this time, it was only theoretical. So I slept well, it was fine. It were just numbers.
Yep.
But after speaking with the unions about the payoff plans, the social plans, and so on, it became a little bit more realistic for me. I had to talk to people, tell big groups that we were going to downsize, and we had to cut off a lot of people. And at that time, the stories came from the people I had to cut off. They were telling why it was really bad for them to to leave the company because they just bought a house, they just had a new kid was coming, and so on. So the first nights after having those conversations for the first time, it was really hard. I didn't sleep. I was awake. Oh, horrible what I did to those people.
Wow.
But at the end, I talked with one of my managers, and we came to the conclusion that, okay, we are cutting off 1,900 people, but we still keep 10,000 people alive working at the company, and the company will be healthier, so their job will be secured that way. So that's how I can sleep still.
Yes, you're right. And I'm certain that, with your emotional skills, like in terms of people skills that we were talking before, you're also able to give them some strength to see, if possible, a positive aspect as an opportunity, other than just say, you fired, that's it. So I really admire you for doing that, because it's definitely not an easy task, but it's a very interesting perspective when it comes to, it's either some people go and some will maintain and will be able to keep feeding their families and keep going, other than suddenly nobody else has a job because the business cannot be sustainable. So I think it's a very good actually advice for those who are starting to do this kind of job, or they have this responsibility, to think about what will happen if you don't do it, right? I think this is the point. If you don't do it, then everybody collapses together. I guess this is the message, if I'm right.
Yes, that's the message that I'm sending. You are doing it for the company and keep the company strong, but also for the employees that stay in the company. And that was also one of the targets when we were talking to the unions. We had to negotiate with them what we were going to do, what we could do for the employees, what we could change so we could keep a little bit more employees into the company. But I always say, hey, you have to keep the bigger picture in mind, and the spot is very important. So it's like a game of Jenga. I don't know if you know the game Jenga.
No, tell me.
Oh, you don't know? It's a big tower you build with little stones, and you have to pick out the stones and keep the tower stable. So if you do it in the wrong way and move too much pieces, or the wrong pieces on one side, it will collapse completely. So your plan will be destroyed. So when you are negotiating with those unions, you have to keep in mind, my tower has to be steady. There has to be a steady ground to stay on. Otherwise it will collapse and your plan will be useless.
Wow, that's a lovely anecdote. Thanks for sharing. I'm sure many people will be inspired by this story, and they'll be able actually to feel stronger. Honestly, it really makes it much easier to see from this perspective, and it makes a lot of sense. Otherwise, everybody would collapse anyway at the end, right? So that's amazing. Thank you for sharing, Stefan. Very interesting. Now, mergers and acquisition, right? Because this is of course, it's part of what you do when there is a merger or there is an acquisition. That's where the restructure sometimes it starts, aside from, the unprecedented pandemic times. So it is a very big buzz topic these days, right? So what would you say, in your expertise and successful stories in your career, what is the most crucial element somebody at a strategy level like yours needs to consider for a successful restructuring merger?
Yes, of course, we are always steering with data. But what's the most important thing when you have different companies that you are going to merge together is cultures of those companies. So you have to understand those cultures first before you can start merging, because you have to steer in another way in every culture to get them to the same level as the company you are merging it in. So that's quite important.
Wow, interesting, because now it goes into really understanding the aspect of the data analytics, right? Which is a pretty big deal of your role. This is very fascinating, actually, because it's not just about go ahead and do it. There must be a whole of analysis, a lot of understanding. I would say probably, I would see as you have to put some kind of formula together before you can start executing anything. Would you be able to share a little bit more about how is that about data analytics? How do you collect the data before you can start planning, strategizing, and then deploying, executing for a successful, corporate goal to be achieved?
when we start a merger, we go to the companies and we try to get all the processes on paper, and then we are going to reflect which processes are the best in every company, and then we are going to align those. So that's how we assemble the data, especially with talking to people, because it's beautiful when it's on paper, but mostly on the work floor it happens a little bit different. So we are speaking to people, getting it on paper, and that data we are going to check, and then we will find out how we can optimize those processes. And that's we do from the sales departments till the supply chain.
Wow, that's really interesting. I think I do remember we were talking just before when you said that you actually like to hear and involve the teams before you can actually start strategizing and putting into plan. I think that's probably one of your successful ways of dealing and getting the results. You don't just go and say, hey, here is what we're going to do. Now that's what's going to be done. And that's how you do it. You involve. I remember this conversation, you involve them in your decision, you involve them into the planning, so everybody feels like they contributed. Is that right? Are you able to share a little bit with the audience an example in that?
Yes, of course. After we assembled all data and analyzed it, we make a plan. We know where we want to go. But then the transformation process starts, and we are trying to keep all people on every levels helping us with that process. So, and we also giving them the feeling that they are a big part of the plan and they can decide certain things. Of course, we have a goal to work through, but sometimes you have to make a little turn so you can get the people with you. So I really like the bottom-up structure when you are changing stuff like that.
Wow, that's fascinating. Really, really thank you for sharing that. I think it's a lot of insights for those who are actually wondering how do they get that done, especially in your case when you had almost 2,000 people to deal with. So this is amazing. Now, having said that, there must be a moment in your career that it was not that smooth and straightforward, right? I can imagine how it could have been tough at some cases with some specific types of people. So would you be able to share one of the latest restructure plan or projects that you had to execute, and what was the outcome?
The merger of 4 business units into one. It was during a hectic time, the COVID period, so we couldn't travel a lot, and that's the easiest way to connect with people, traveling and seeing them in person. But okay, we had to do it via Teams instead, so it's less personal, but it also has positive sides that you could have short meetings for half an hour instead of being there a complete day, and people could connect with you easier. So what COVID proved us is that we can do a lot of things digital instead of in person, but still I think it's very important that you can go to the people sometimes in person so you can have that connection with them.
Wow, yes, I absolutely agree with you. I have clients currently in more than 25 countries, and sometimes I feel the difference when they are in the same country that I am. What a difference it is just to go and meet and have be able to feel the energy of the person, the relationship, the flow of conversation, the communication. It becomes much more, I would say, personable, and people are much more, let's say, aligned, and there is a better click in terms of, how do you proceed further, and the understanding of what results are to be achieved are much easier when you are face to face. It's not just a bunch of, I would call it pixels. At the moment, we are a bunch of pixels, but with a big soul and heart. I'm certain about that. Good.
Yeah, for sure. But I would say something extra about it, because body language is so important to recognize. Especially, did you ever negotiate with Asian people, Isabelita?
At some stages.
Yeah, but if you do it via a screen, it's really hard to read their body language.
Oh no, never the screen. Yes, no.
Yeah, and mostly they are saying yes, but via their body language you can see it's no, when you have to start over again. Negotiating with people from Asia is completely different than in Europe or in the United States. So It's really necessary to be with them.
Interesting. That's lovely to hear because, I do have clients telling me that they want to actually to go to Asia. They find a fascinating, continent actually to be explored, and where, of course, a lot of things that is still happening, is still booming, where the rest of the world is suffering. So I think it's a good insight that you're giving to the audience for those who want to expand their career development, and they want to potentially explore how important it is to just go there and be present and have this awareness that body language sometimes is a combination of tone of voice, and I would say, as you said, words. Now words are definitely something that anybody can say at any point of time, but now the tone of voice and the body language is really where you can grasp that communication, right? And that's a wonderful, I would say, light for the people who say, I don't get that. Sometimes I have clients telling me, hey, even the recruiter or the headhunter, they speak to them, they told me such and such, but I don't see this happening. I don't know what's happening. Hey, it's not about the words. It's about, the entire communication, body language plus the tone of voice. I think it's key. Nobody can pretend a tone of voice. Even the body language, I would say, to an extent, can be probably, let's say, role played. But tone of voice, I think it's almost impossible unless somebody is a real true psychopath, which I hope we don't come across any along our journey.
Yeah. I totally agree, and also the eyes are very, very interesting. You can almost can't hide what you are thinking in your eyes. That's for sure. But on a screen, it's almost impossible to notice it in the eyes.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Actually, I don't know when I mentioned about psychopaths, actually it's one of the topics that I find interesting to learn about, because you never know when you're dealing with one, right? And it's one of the things they mentioned, that the eyes, their look in the eyes is the first way to observe if there is a trait of being a psychopath, because they can pretend everything, but the eyes, the look in the eye can't be faked. So I love what you mentioned. That's a definitely great aspect. I hope we're having good looks in our eyes now.
Well, luckily they can't see it on a screen, so that's a great part. And beside of the eyes, you have the micro expressions, but it's something you have to train yourself into see micro expressions at someone's face.
Wow, now, Stefan, I'm starting to realize why you're so good in restructures and getting people to get things done. It must be something you do about the micro expressions that people don't even notice, right? But what we know that you're successful and you get the results. I think there's much more to be shared. We should have another conversation at some stage all about psychology and the power of influencing through body language and expressions and tone of voice. So this is really, really interesting topic. Thank you for talking about it as well. So now, just before I go into my last question, if somebody wants to reach out to you and gain some insights, network, say, hey, I do need to talk to Stefan. He needs to tell me more how he did it, how he does it. Maybe, just quick chat. Are you open to it? And if so, how can they find you?
Yeah, it's always lovely to speak to other people about stuff I'm interested in, and they can find me at LinkedIn under my name, Stefan Heijinis. So please reach out if you want to talk about the topics I introduced today.
Lovely, that's great. Thank you so much. And now we go to my very last question. So now you're still very, very young, but looking ahead, maybe 30 years from now, you were to look in hindsight, what would you have to have left in terms of legacy? What impact would you like to have made for people's lives?
Well, I hope that the people I worked with and the people that know me very close say that I help them develop themselves, be the best versions of themselves, and I want to do something for the environment as well.
Wow, lovely. I'm very glad that you mentioned about the environment. I do believe that we can't be disconnected from caring to nature, and it's at the end of the day, we like it or not, it's going to be the future. We're going to be able to continue living in Earth if environment is taken care of. So wow, that's very interesting and very thoughtful of you to consider the environment. Thank you. I want to thank you for that. I do love nature myself, and I do love the environment, and I think it's essential. So very good. So, well, Stefan, thank you so much for being here today. It was really amazing having you.
It was my pleasure, Isabelita.
Thank you very much. Everyone, thank you so much for watching and being part of this community. We really hope you enjoyed and feel ready to revamp your career with the insights shared by Stefan Heijinis. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to this channel to get amazing insights from the top elite executives across the world. Until next time, stay blessed. I'll be speaking to the creme de la creme, senior leaders and managers who have crossed my path. Okay, sorry. I was remembering what just happened. I'm sorry. Let me start again.